In 1931, a historian named James Truslow Adams sat down to write a book called The Epic of America. In it, he coined a phrase that would define the next century of human ambition. He called it the American Dream. But here is the part history books conveniently leave out. Adams explicitly warned us that this dream was not a dream of motor cars and high wages merely. He envisioned a social order of capability and freedom, not accumulation. Fast forward to 2026. That dream has been sold, packaged, and financed into a nightmare. Today, the United States holds a record $18.5 trillion in household debt. 62% of the population lives paycheck to paycheck. And this isn't just a poverty issue. 42% of people earning over $100,000 a year have zero money left at the end of the month. We are the most productive generation in history, yet we are drowning in the very dream we were told to chase. What if I told you this wasn't an accident? What if the white picket fence, the 30-year mortgage, and the 2-car garage weren't designed to make you wealthy, but were engineered to keep you obedient? The American dream hasn't died. It's just become the most expensive marketing campaign in human history, and you are the product. You might think this is just a poverty issue. You might think, if I just earned 6 figures, I would be free. But the data tells a much darker story. According to a recent report by Goldman Sachs, 40% of Americans earning over $300,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck. Let that sink in. These are the successful people, the ones who made it. And yet, nearly half of them are one missed deposit away from financial chaos. This phenomenon has become so common, it now has an acronym on Wall Street: HENRYs. High earners, not rich yet. But why? How does someone earning $25,000 a month end up with zero? It is because the version of the American dream we have been sold is mathematically designed to keep you at zero. We have been trained to confuse standard of living with quality of life, and the system relies on this confusion. Look at the modern markers of success. The average new car payment in America has hit $735 a month. For nearly 20% of buyers, that payment is over $1,000. We are normalizing 4-figure monthly subscriptions just to get to work. We buy homes we can barely afford to impress neighbors we barely know, locking ourselves into 30-year contracts that turn us from free citizens into indentured servants of the bank. And this isn't an accident, it is an economic necessity. The United States economy has a dirty secret. It doesn't run on production anymore, it runs on consumption. Roughly 70% of the entire US GDP is driven by consumer spending. Think about what that means. If you actually saved your money, if you opted out of the upgrade cycle, kept your old car, and bought a modest home, the economy would collapse. The system needs you to be a conduit. It needs money to flow through you, not to you. They have engineered a society where success is defined by how much debt you can service, not how much freedom you possess. You aren't building wealth, you are financing an image, and the price of that image is your life. To understand how we went from a nation of savers to a nation of debtors, we have to look at the moment the rules were rewritten. Because the trap you are in wasn't built yesterday. It was designed decades ago by men who understood exactly how the human mind works. When I first began researching this story, I expected to find a narrative about personal irresponsibility. I assumed the data would show that we had simply become a generation of hedonists addicted to instant gratification. I thought I was investigating a failure of discipline. But as I spent weeks combing through Federal Reserve reports, inflation-adjusted cost indices, and marketing archives from the mid-20th century, that assumption crumbled. There was a specific moment during this investigation where the reality of the situation actually made me stop writing. I was cross-referencing the cost of the pillars of the American dream against median wage growth over the last 40 years. And looking at those charts, I realized something terrifying. The game isn't just hard, the game is rigged. If you are watching this right now, earning a salary that would have made your grandparents feel rich, yet you still feel a low-level hum of anxiety every time you open your banking app, you need to know that you are not crazy. That feeling of running on a treadmill that speeds up every time you get a raise, that isn't a symptom of your incompetence. It is a feature of the system's design. We carry so much shame around money. We hide our debt numbers like they are moral failings. We look at our neighbors with their new SUVs and kitchen renovations and wonder why we can't seem to make the math work like they do. But what I discovered is that your neighbors aren't making the math work either. They are just drowning quietly. The shame you feel is the glue that holds this system together. It keeps you working longer hours. It keeps you terrified of losing your job. And most importantly, it keeps you from asking the question that threatens the entire structure. Who actually benefits from my stress? Before we expose the specific mechanics of this trap, I want to ask you a favor. If you are tired of the shame and ready to understand the truth about money, subscribe to the channel right now. We are building a community of people who are opting out of the game, and we want you with us. Now, let's go back to the beginning. To understand how a nation of independent citizens was transformed into a standing army of debt servicing employees, we have to look at the specific moment in history when the economy stopped serving the people and the people began serving the economy. Because this trap didn't appear out of nowhere, it was built brick by brick. To find the origin, we have to go back to a time before the iPhone, before the credit card, and before the suburbs even existed. The year was 1945. World War II had just ended. For 4 years, the American industrial machine had been running at maximum capacity. Unemployment had effectively dropped to zero. But as the war ended, economists and politicians were terrified. They knew that if the factories stopped running, the Great Depression would return. They had a massive supply capability, but without the war, they had no demand. So, they decided to turn the American citizen into the ultimate consumer. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it was a stated public policy. To understand the blueprint, we have to look at a man named Paul Mazur. He was a senior partner at Lehman Brothers. In a Harvard Business Review article that became the manifesto for the modern economy, Mazur wrote the following words. Listen closely, because this is the operating system of your life today. We must shift America from a needs to a desires culture. People must be trained to desire, to want new things, even before the old have been entirely consumed. We must shape a new mentality. Man's desires must overshadow his needs. Read that again. People must be trained. Before this moment, Americans bought things because they needed them. You bought a chair because you needed to sit. But Mazur and his contemporaries in the emerging field of public relations, men like Edward Bernays, realized that needs are finite. You only need one coat. But desires? Desires are infinite. Bernays taught corporations that they weren't selling products, they were selling identity. If you could link a product to a person's self-worth, they wouldn't just buy it once, they would buy it forever. But there was a problem. To turn the average worker into a super consumer, they needed a physical environment that facilitated consumption. The cramped city apartments where people lived didn't have room for washing machines, dryers, 2 cars, and lawnmowers. Enter the federal government and the creation of suburbia. In the late 1940s and 50s, the government launched the most aggressive social engineering project in history. Through the GI Bill and the Federal Housing Administration, they didn't just subsidize housing, they radically altered how housing was financed. Prior to the 1930s, if you wanted to buy a home, you typically needed 50% down and you had to pay it off in 3 to 5 years. It was an asset you saved for, not a debt you carried. The government changed the rules. They created the 30-year fixed-rate mortgage. On the surface, this looked like benevolence. It made home ownership accessible to the middle class. But look closer at the math. By stretching the debt over 3 decades, they didn't make the house cheaper. They made the payment smaller while tripling the total cost through interest. They transformed home ownership from a badge of stability into a lifelong financial obligation. Suddenly, millions of Americans were moving into developments like Levittown, New York, and every single one of those isolated suburban boxes needed to be filled. They needed refrigerators, they needed televisions, they needed cars to commute to the jobs that paid for the cars. It was the perfect economic engine. The American dream of the white picket fence wasn't a cultural accident. It was an economic strategy to solve the problem of overproduction. By the 1950s, the trap was set. The good life had been successfully redefined as a life of continuous purchase. But the architects of this system had one more problem to solve. The American worker was now willing to buy everything. They had the desire, they had the house to put it in, but they eventually ran into a mathematical wall. They only had so much cash. To keep the machine running, the system needed a way to let people spend money they didn't have. And in 1958, a Bank of America manager in Fresno, California, had an idea that would drop a nuclear bomb on the financial health of the middle class. He mailed out 60,000 small plastic cards to unsuspecting residents. What happened next didn't just change the economy, it rewrote the psychology of the human brain. In September 1958, 60,000 residents of Fresno opened their mailboxes to find a small plastic rectangle from Bank of America. They hadn't asked for it, they didn't apply for it. It was simply a piece of plastic that allowed them to buy now and pay later. It was called the Fresno Drop, and it was the patient zero of the modern debt epidemic. That card, which would eventually become Visa, solved the biggest problem facing the consumption economy: the psychological barrier of parting with cash. Behavioral economists have a term for the negative feeling you get when you hand over physical money. They call it the pain of paying. When you count out $100 bills, the insula, the part of your brain associated with physical pain, lights up. You feel the loss immediately, but the credit card was designed to anesthetize that pain. In a landmark study conducted at MIT, researchers discovered that subjects were willing to pay up to 100% more for the exact same item simply because they were using a credit card instead of cash. The plastic creates a decoupling effect. It separates the pleasure of the purchase from the pain of the payment. You get the dopamine hit today. You feel the pain 30 days later. But by then, the item is already yours, and the pain is dull, abstract, and easily managed by a minimum payment. This mechanism is the engine of the trap, but the system needed a way to enforce it. It needed a way to ensure that participating in this debt cycle wasn't just an option, but a requirement for survival in American society. Enter the FICO score. Most people believe their credit score is a measure of their financial health. They wear a score of 800 like a badge of honor, believing it proves they are good with money. This is one of the most successful marketing lies ever told. The FICO score, which didn't become the standard for mortgage lending until 1995, does not measure your wealth. It does not measure your assets. It does not measure your income. You can have $1 million in the bank and no credit score. You can be broke, earning minimum wage, and have a perfect score. The FICO score measures one thing and one thing only: how profitable you are to the banking system. It measures your obedience as a debtor. By making this score the gatekeeper to housing, transportation, and even employment, the system mandated participation. You must borrow money to prove you are trustworthy. You must enter the trap to show you can handle the trap. And once you are in, the banks have a very specific name for you. If you are the type of person who pays off their credit card balance in full every single month, someone who uses the system for convenience but pays zero interest, the credit card industry has a nickname for you. They call you a deadbeat. To the banks, a responsible user is a useless user. They don't make their billions from transaction fees. They make them from the people who carry a balance. They make them from the revolvers. A revolver is the ideal citizen of the modern economy. This is someone who borrows money, pays the minimums, and stays in debt forever, generating a stream of 24% interest that flows upward to the issuer. The entire system, from the rewards points that gamify spending to the minimum payment line strategically placed to look like a suggestion, is designed to turn you into a revolver. But the financial engineering is only half the trap. The other half is physical. Because even if you have the credit card and you have the desire to buy, you eventually run out of things to purchase. If you buy a refrigerator that lasts 50 years, you are removed from the market for half a century. So, the system introduced planned obsolescence. This concept dates back to 1924, when the Phoebus cartel, a group of the world's largest light bulb manufacturers, met in Geneva. They agreed to arbitrarily reduce the lifespan of light bulbs from 2,500 hours to 1,000 hours. They engineered their own products to fail, so you would have to buy them again. Today, this is standard operating procedure. It is why your phone battery degrades after 2 years. It is why fast fashion falls apart after 5 washes. They have built a world where everything you own is temporary, but the debt you use to buy it is permanent. You are running a treadmill where the floor is crumbling beneath you, forcing you to run faster just to stay in the same place. You work to pay for the car that gets you to work. You work to pay for the house that sits empty while you are at work. You work to pay for the clothes that you only wear to work. And that is the system working exactly as designed. But the real scandal isn't just that the game is rigged psychologically or mechanically. It is that when you actually sit down and do the math on what this system costs you over a lifetime, the numbers stop being frustrating and start being terrifying. Because the true cost isn't the interest rate, it is the life you never got to live. Because opinions can be debated, marketing can be spun, but compound interest does not lie. To understand the full extent of the trap, we are going to run a simulation. We are going to look at the finances of a typical successful American professional. Let's call him Michael. Michael is 30 years old. He earns a solid salary, let's say $85,000 a year. He follows the standard American script perfectly. He has a college degree, a steady job, and a credit score of 760. By all societal metrics, Michael is winning. But let's look at what the system extracts from Michael over his lifetime. First, let's look at transportation. Michael buys a new car. Nothing flashy, just a standard SUV to get to work safely. The average new car payment in America is now $735 a month. Michael thinks the cost of the car is $40,000, but that is the sticker price. That is not the real cost. The real cost is the opportunity cost. What that money would have become if it had been working for him instead of the bank. If Michael took that $735 a month and invested it in a standard S&P 500 index fund with an average historical return of 8% over a 40-year career, that money wouldn't be $40,000. It would be $2.4 million. Let that number land. $2.4 million. That is the price of driving a new car. When you sign that lease, you aren't just buying a vehicle, you are handing over your financial independence. You are trading a decade of early retirement for the smell of new leather and heated seats. If this math is making you angry, good. It should. If you want to learn how to calculate your own opportunity costs and stop bleeding money, hit the like button right now. It helps us spread this financial wake-up call to more people. Now let's look at the main course, the house. We are told that renting is throwing money away and that buying a home is the ultimate investment. But let's look at the amortization schedule of a standard 30-year mortgage. Let's say Michael buys a $500,000 home with a 5% down payment. He takes out a loan for $475,000 at today's rates, around 7%. His monthly payment is roughly $3,100. In the first year of that mortgage, Michael will pay nearly $38,000 to the bank. Guess how much of that actually goes toward paying off the house? $5,000. $33,000 goes straight to interest. It evaporates. It is pure profit for the lender. Over the life of that 30-year loan, Michael won't pay $475,000. He will pay over $1.1 million. He will buy the house for himself and then he will buy another house for the bank. When you combine the car payments, the mortgage interest, the student loan interest, and the credit card fees, you begin to see the terrifying truth of the modern economy. The average American worker will earn roughly $2 to $3 million over their lifetime, and yet the median net worth of an American at age 65 is roughly $250,000. Where did the rest of the money go? It didn't vanish. It was transferred. It was transferred to Ford, to Visa, to Chase, to the student loan services. The system is designed to be a siphon. It is engineered to extract 90% of your lifetime productivity, leaving you with just enough to keep showing up to work, but never enough to walk away. This is why you see people earning six figures who are broke. It is not because they buy too many lattes. It is because the structural costs of the American dream are mathematically designed to consume wealth faster than you can build it. You are running a race where the finish line is moving away from you at exactly the speed you are running. If you follow the rules, if you do everything you are told, the math guarantees that you will lose. You will trade the best 45 years of your life for a retirement that, statistically speaking, you might not even be healthy enough to enjoy. You aren't working to build a life. You are working to service the debt on the life you were sold. It feels hopeless. But here is what they don't tell you. While 95% of the population is running on this treadmill, there is a small group of people who have stepped off. They looked at this same math, saw the trap, and realized that if the system is designed to keep you poor, the only way to win is to stop playing their game. They found a backdoor in the code, a way to reverse the flow of money so that compound interest works for them, not against them. And once you see how they did it, you will realize that your freedom isn't 40 years away. It could be closer than you ever imagined. The solution to this trap wasn't found in a self-help book or a lottery ticket. It was found in a spreadsheet. When I started looking for the people who had escaped the system, people who retired in their 30s or 40s, I noticed they all understood one fundamental truth. They understood that in the modern economy, there are two distinct classes of people. And I'm not talking about the 1% versus the 99%. I'm talking about the difference between the consumer class and the capital class. The consumer class trades their time for money and then immediately trades that money for things. They are the engine of the economy. They are the ones paying the interest. The capital class plays a completely different game. They don't trade money for things. They trade money for freedom. They realize that the American dream we just deconstructed is actually a liability masquerading as success. So they flip the equation. Remember Michael, our corporate professional drowning in payments? Let's look at what happens when he applies the logic of the capital class. Let's say Michael decides that instead of buying the $40,000 SUV, he buys a reliable 5-year-old used car for $10,000. He doesn't care what his neighbors think. He cares about the math. That decision saves him roughly $500 a month in payments and insurance. Then, he decides to stay in a smaller apartment or a modest starter home instead of stretching for the McMansion. That saves him another $1,000 a month. He cancels the subscriptions he doesn't use. He stops upgrading his phone every year. He finds an extra $2,000 a month in margin that used to go to corporations. Now here is the magic. If Michael takes that $2,000 and invests it into the same S&P 500 index fund we talked about earlier, he isn't just saving money, he is buying employees. Every dollar he invests is a little worker that goes out into the world and works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to earn more money for him. And those new dollars, they become workers too. This is the backdoor in the system. The banking industry relies on you paying compound interest to them. But when you become an investor, you force the banking industry, the tech industry, and the consumer goods industry to pay compound interest to you. You stop being the fuel. You become the owner of the engine. There is a specific number that makes this real. It is called the Rule of 25. Researchers at Trinity University conducted a landmark study on market history. They found that once you have saved 25 times your annual expenses, you can statistically withdraw 4% of that portfolio every single year, adjusted for inflation, and never run out of money. This is your freedom number. If you spend $50,000 a year to live, you need $1.25 million invested. Once you hit that number, work becomes optional. You are free. Now, $1.25 million sounds like a lot, but remember the opportunity cost of the standard path? Remember the $2.4 million Michael lost on cars? Remember the $1.1 million lost to mortgage interest? The money for your freedom is already passing through your hands. You are just giving it away to buy a version of success that was invented by a marketing department in the 1950s. The people who escaped the trap, the people in the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early, didn't win the lottery. They just realized that a high savings rate is the ultimate arbitrage. If you save 10% of your income, you have to work 9 years to buy 1 year of freedom. But if you save 50% of your income, for every 1 year you work, you buy 1 year of freedom. Suddenly, retirement isn't something that happens at 65. It is something that happens in 12 to 15 years. This is the revelation. The system is designed to extract wealth from the impatient and transfer it to the patient. The American dream is to look rich. The reality of wealth is to be free. And once you understand that every dollar you spend is a trade-off not for goods but for your own time on this earth, the flashy car doesn't look like a status symbol anymore. It looks like 3 years of your life shackled to a desk. The exit door is unlocked. It always has been. But walking through it requires you to do the hardest thing imaginable in a consumer culture. It requires you to say enough. But knowing the path is one thing. Walking it requires a completely new operating system for your life. Because the moment you try to step off the treadmill, the system will try to pull you back on. So, how do we build a new dream? How do we construct a life that is immune to the trap? In 1999, the film The Matrix gave us a metaphor that has bled into almost every corner of modern culture. The choice between the blue pill and the red pill. The blue pill offers the comfort of the illusion. You wake up in your bed, you believe whatever you want to believe, and you go back to the office. The red pill offers the truth, and the truth, as we have seen over the last 30 minutes, is uncomfortable, it is messy, and it requires you to take responsibility for a reality that is rigged against you. Walking away from the American dream, the version sold to you by Visa, by Ford, and by the real estate lobby, is an act of rebellion. When you decide to stop playing the status game, you become a glitch in their system. When you drive a 10-year-old car so you can max out your investment accounts, you are rejecting the narrative that your self-worth is tied to a bumper badge. When you choose to live in a smaller home so you can travel for 3 months a year, you are rejecting the idea that success is measured in square footage. You will look strange to your friends, you will look unsuccessful to your neighbors. While they are upgrading their kitchens, you will be buying your freedom, but you have to ask yourself, whose validation are you paying for? And is it worth the price of your life? Because that is the currency we are really talking about here. Not dollars, not Bitcoin, not gold. Time. The tragedy of the modern financial system isn't that it steals your money, it is that it steals your agency. It forces you to sell the prime years of your life to the highest bidder just to service the debt on a lifestyle you didn't even choose. We treat money as if it is scarce and time as if it is infinite. But the reality is the exact opposite. Money is abundant. It is printed by the trillions every year. Time is the only resource that is truly non-renewable. Every hour you spend working to pay for a car you don't need is an hour you will never get back. Every year you stay in a job you hate because you have a mortgage you can't afford is a year stolen from the only life you will ever have. The architects of this system, from Paul Mazur to the credit card executives, counted on one thing. They counted on your ignorance. They bet that you would never do the math. They bet that you would never look behind the curtain. But now you have. You know the history. You understand the psychology. You have seen the numbers. The ignorance is gone. And now you are left with a choice. You can go back to sleep. You can accept the subscription model of life, upgrade your phone, sign the lease, and hope that 65 comes before the stress breaks you. Or you can wake up. You can decide that standard of living is a trap and quality of life is the goal. You can decide to build a new system. On this channel, that is exactly what we are going to do. We are going to dismantle the myths of the financial industry one by one. We are going to explore the strategies of the capital class. We are going to learn how to build wealth not for the sake of hoarding it, but for the sake of owning your time. This investigation was just the diagnosis. The cure is what comes next. So if you are ready to stop being the product and start being the architect, make sure you are subscribed. Because the education system didn't teach you this, and your employer certainly won't. The world is full of people waiting for permission to be free. They are waiting for a lottery win, a promotion, or a retirement party that might never come. Don't wait. The system was meticulously designed to keep you working until the day you die. Your job is to build the system that sets you free. The only thing more expensive than financial ignorance is the time you will never get back. Start building your escape today.